Hello, and welcome to another episode of Dr. G at the Heart of Healthcare. We are having fun in season two, and today we're going to talk about estate planning for the end of life. And I have an expert here, David Smallwood from True Wealth Partners, and he's based in Nashville, but he can help all Americans with the expertise today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dr. G. It's great to be here.
Okay, so I have to tell my listeners how we know each other. We are friends from college, and he's my brother. Like, we've adopted each other. His wife and me were sisters. We had three kids together. Like, we got married 3 months apart. We just grew up together. So we have that piece, but we always also have your expertise. So I'm glad we can do that and share today.
And it's awesome to be here. And you mentioning that we've been friends for 32 years now. We met in 1992. So,
Wow. Yeah. And so David Smallwood, he's a wealth manager and he's always been finance minded in college. He saved his family money by looking on that list where folks who lived in Bel Air by UCLA, they would have a room that you could rent or you could live there and trade for like nannying or something like that. I know that's what your wife did, but just being resourceful with finances. And so it's so apropos that you're in your position now. So tell us about your expertise a little bit and how you got to where you are before we jump in.
oh yeah, absolutely. So my expertise is I am a financial advisor in wealth management. And really, that means a lot of things to a lot of people, but what I refer to it as just helping folks really be on the road to financial security, helping people have a very clear plan around their finances, because a lot of people have saved in different places, but they don't necessarily have a specific plan that shows them how they're tracking towards retirement so that work can one day become a choice and not be a necessity. So my conversations day in and day out with folks are around how do we help you have a written plan for your family to make sure you're tracking towards reaching your financial goals, and that you have a solid plan in place to ensure that you're going to run out of time before you run out of money.
Oh, that's good. And so what type of credentialing or all that? Because I'm not that familiar with it either, but what does it take to get to where you are, just briefly?
It's as a financial advisor, I am fully investment licensed. I'm partners with three other guys in my firm who are CFPs, and CFP stands for Certified Financial Planner, which means we are fiduciaries, and part of that is really meaning that everything that we do is really about being in the best interest of the client. And we don't make any recommendations or anything that are outside of what's going to make sure that the client is going to be well served and is going to help them to achieve their goals.
Okay, okay. That when you say the word fiduciary, I'm like, oh, I know about some of those in the community, so that makes sense to me. And I want to make sure my listeners are tracking along with this. So when we were preparing for this audience, I learned that folks like David work alongside estate planning attorneys and things of that nature. And I know some people may say, "Hey, I don't have any wealth. Let me turn this off." Like, what's the utility for the type of things that we're going to talk about today?
Yeah, so the for an estate planning attorney, or us being connected to an estate planning attorney as a wealth management advisor, everybody needs a living will and trust in place. While finances are a huge part of that, it's only a small part of it, because some of the things that are more important around having an estate plan in place, especially for families, are if you still have kids in the home. The will and living trust is what's going to define, if you don't make it home, who's going to take care of, who's going to raise your kids. And more importantly, any resources that you do have, any investment accounts, retirement accounts, assets, etc., you have to have that written and documented of how you want that allocated to make sure that your kids are taken care of the way that you want them taken care of. And so that's going to be inside of a will and estate plan. And so, and again, that is just about your family and your kids and making sure that they're taken care of. But then more importantly, there are those directives in there that are not about just when we're no longer here, but while we're alive. Powers of attorney as it relates to your health, powers of attorney as it relates to your finances, meaning that if you were incapacitated, have you allowed somebody the ability to be able to make decisions for your health and your finances while you're still here? And so again, that doesn't necessarily have everything to do with your money. There's a lot of directives in here that if you can't make decisions for yourself, the will and estate plan is what's going to define that for you.
I'm so happy that you said that because the listeners know we're coming off the heels of National Healthcare Decisions Day, the day after tax day. And, my focus, since I'm a physician, is more on the healthcare, right? I see so many crises, so many problems and issues at the end of life that I want to help people try to prevent those. And that's why I have certain guests like this. And so I'm so glad you mentioned that. So let's just back up for a second because you have a lot of good things that you mentioned while we were preparing. I want to talk about the three stages of wealth that you define for me, so we can kind of frame how we live. Like we're born, we get to live with our parents, and then like we're empty nesters, and you got to get out there and figure it out. So, what are those three phases?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked about that. So I'll go back before I define the three phases. I'll just say that, for all of us, we've got two dates. We've got a birth date and we've got a death date. And then there's a dash between those two dates. Now, that dash between those two dates is the life we live. And if you look at a timeline from that birth date to the death date, there's one thing that's consistent that's needed throughout that dash, and that's money. There's dollars, there's resources that are needed, right? And so when we're young, we've got our family that raises us, but then when we become independent, there's essentially three phases of our financial picture that we go through. And the phase one is the accumulation phase. The accumulation phase is the money that you're making over the course of your lifetime that hopefully you're going to get to the point one day where if you do keep working, it's because you want to and not because you have to. And so we refer to that as the freedom date. And so we're helping folks think through, hey, what buckets do I need to be saving into and how much do I need to be saving in order for me to get to a freedom date and have a rock solid plan in place that ensures that I'm going to run out of time before I run out of money, and whatever legacy I want to leave to the coming generations, I've planned for that as well. So that's the accumulation phase. The second phase is the distribution phase. That's when you've worked your entire life and you've accumulated dollars into separate buckets. Then it is about saying, hey, I've accumulated dollars into certain buckets. And now how do I distribute that money back to myself over the course of what could be a 20, 30, or 40-year retirement? And so that is a distribution phase. So during the accumulation phase, we're saving enough to make sure that during the distribution phase, we have different buckets that we are able to distribute from that recreate the paychecks that we're no longer receiving from our employer. So that's the distribution phase.
Retirement optional, you said, or retirement
Yeah,
work optional.
work optional. I mean,
Okay.
so because there's a big time psychological difference between you getting to a point where if you keep working, it's because you want to and not because you have to. And that's what work optional is. If somebody gets to 60, 65, or 70 and they keep working because it's passion and mission and they enjoy it, that's great. But if you get to 65 or 70 or 75 and you have to keep working because you have not saved, that's not necessarily as fun as work being optional. So we're helping folks think through, we want work to at some point become not a necessity, but a choice. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's phase two, the distribution in retirement. And then the third phase is really around succession and legacy planning. That's thinking about, okay, if there are people or things that are important to you that will outlive you, and that can be philanthropic endeavors or things or organizations that you want to give to. That can be children and grandchildren. We're thinking about the succession planning of what do you want to go to those folks or those organizations? How do we plan for that? And so we begin a plan with the end in mind, starting there. And then we back up to present day, whether you're 20, 30, 40, 50, and say, okay, how do we start by beginning with the end in mind, go back to present day and map out a baseline plan that helps you start tracking towards those goals.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I love how you said, people should still have a living will, because what if it's a young family that, I know like when we first got married, didn't have much, but we've always had life insurance. So you mean the living will to identify, okay, when this money is distributed, like who's taking the kids, where's it going, how it's allocated to take care of them, to raise the young kids to their adulthood and college, right?
That is that, Dr. G, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Because if you think about this, if let's say somebody, a young family doesn't have a will in place and a parent or both parents don't make it home, well, whoever is next of kin gets those may get those kids. But if there are no directives and there are assets that come to those family members, they can do whatever they want with that money. They don't have to use it for the benefit of the kids, which is why we want to have that will and living trust in place. Because if you've got 2 or 3 kids and your desire is for them, for their college education to be fully funded, you want to have that written down, that these dollars or this life insurance is to make sure, one, that my kids are fully educated. You may have in there, you want to make sure that you buy a house for your kids, or there may be some other legacy goals or things that you want to have happen with your resources that need to be clearly defined inside of that estate plan.
That's wonderful. Okay, so let's get to the next thing you taught me about, the 16-point legacy planning. I guess, again, I don't know everything that's in there, but that would be what someone works on when they're doing their estate planning for the end of life. So tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a 16 point what we call legacy planning checklist. And it's really saying, hey, here are 16 things that you should be thinking about while everybody's healthy and life is going great, that you should think about having in place that really defines what life looks like now, what it's going to look like in the future, and what it's going to look like when you are either incapacitated and can't make decisions, or you're no longer here. And that checklist, I'll just run down it quickly. It's one, creating a key contact list, and that's having all your team. I call it your dream team, your team of strategic breakthrough partners, and that's going to be your financial planner, your insurance agent, your family attorney, your charities, your schools, employers. All of those things are part of that key contact list. Number two is going to be in this digital age that we live in, it's having a place where you share your codes to your cell phone and computers. That if for some reason you were incapacitated and somebody needed to get to key information, that stuff isn't locked away in a vault and people can't get to it. Number three is gathering login credentials for all your online accounts and having those in one place. Four is creating a digital legacy list, and that's making a plan on how you would like your digital assets, all your media accounts, all those interactive platforms. How do you want those basically as a part of your legacy? And then five is we just talked about this, making a detailed plan for your dependents, and that's going to be around their education, a financial plan, anything you want to have happen for your dependents, that's a dependent plan. Then gather and summarize all of your medical information, your doctors, your medical insurance, your prescriptions, all of the medical information, having that documented. Then it's gathering and summarizing all of your property information, your primary property. A lot of folks have multiple properties, rental properties in different places of the country. It's having all your properties summarized in one place. Then it's gathering and summarizing all your legal information. That's going to be your birth certificate, marriage certificate, passports, having all that gathered in one place. And then creating advanced healthcare directive, that, the document that's going to say, here are my wishes from a medical perspective. And then designate and create a power of attorney. And this is important because this is what ends up sending a lot of families, to court. to be able to make decisions is not somebody not being designated as a power of attorney, and somebody being able to make financial decisions and health decisions. Having that power of attorney is important. And then creating a living will. And the living will is what documents how you wish to be cared for if you become terminally ill and you're unable to make decisions for yourself. The living will is what determines that. And you can provide very clear instructions on the type of assisted living you should prefer and all your needs around if you are terminally ill, what do you want to have happen? That is inside of the living will. And then it's creating a trust as a part of your estate plan, all your real estate stocks and everything else, your assets. And then it's making financial succession arrangements around your bank accounts, your life insurance, et cetera. And then gathering and summarizing all your financial information, making final arrangements. Do you want to be cremated? Do you want, do you want a memorial service? What do you want? And then the final one is building a digital family playbook. And that's really just saying, hey, can we bring all these things together in what we will refer to as one digital vault, where if somebody needs to get to it and they go into this vault, there's no misunderstandings about what your wishes are.
Woo! You probably need a sip of water after that. That is awesome. And imagine people having to do all that when they find out their loved one died, their grandparent or whatever, like, going through drawers and cabinets, like you said, looking for things and we don't know where it is. That 16-point legacy planning is wonderful. And that is something that everyone should work on, myself included, because there's so many components to that. And, I don't want to get too much into, the dark side of estate planning, but we have seniors who they're having their wishes challenged by their own children. During the podcast with Nathan Kottkamp for National Healthcare Decisions Day, I asked him about that, and it's really a thing. Like I multiple lawsuits, people suing their parents because they believe they're entitled to something, or if the parent switches it to another person who they think is more responsible, the challenges that are coming. I just find that very difficult to swallow, because if I say I want something and then I happen to, have Alzheimer's, for instance, no one should be able to challenge, my legal documentation of my wishes and my legacy and all that. So I wonder how we can protect people more. If you have any ideas about that.
Well, I would say that the main protection and is going to be getting with an estate planning attorney. I meet with people all the time and I ask them, do you have a will and living trust in place? And they say, yeah, I've written a document and mailed it to myself. And I said, that is not a legally binding document. You need to actually have a written plan that has been, that you have connected with an estate planning attorney. And even at True Wealth Partners, we have a resource that we use. It's another company. It's called Trust and Will, trustandwill.com. And Trust and Will has made it very easy where you actually can do everything online. They'll connect you with a local estate planning attorney virtually in your state. So everything can be state specific. All the notarization and the completion of the documents is done online. So you don't even have to leave the comfort of your home in order to get that will in place. And so we're big advocates of saying that at the foundational piece, you've got to connect with an estate planning attorney that is in your state to make sure, because there's the laws are different in different states. And so you want to connect with an attorney in your state to make sure that all of your wishes are documented. And then you want to connect that estate planning attorney with your financial advisor to make sure that the two are walking in lockstep, and all of the titling and beneficiary information on all of your documents, that those all match up. Because a lot of folks don't know that you have beneficiary information on even your retirement accounts and your investment accounts and your insurances. And so you've got to make sure that all that stuff is documented and clearly outlined the way that you want it. And it's even more important, now, Dr. G, because we live in a different time than, say 50 or 60 years ago, where now you got to think about the fact that there are a lot of blended families. There are a lot of folks who are on either like, second or third marriages. And so there's multiple kids there's stepchildren, there's half siblings. And so that can get messy if it's not clearly defined. That can get real tough at the end of life. But if you have all of that defined, it helps resolve for a lot of that, especially when you're dealing with mixed families and a lot of different components and dynamics going on.
Yeah, and I'll just say, having the experience of a lot of different cultures, you know, I'll have to say, black, white, red, blue, yellow, orange. When money's involved, family dynamics really amplify, and it's sad, it's unfortunate, but the people who hold the wealth, they should get that stuff lined up so that, to prevent some of that drama at the end of life. I want to wrap this up. If you could give us some insight and parting words on how we can be sensitive to cultures or different personality types. Some people don't like to talk about the end of life. They're afraid, or they may be superstitious about it, or we have diversity, right? So there's some people who have not done anything. They're like, figure it out on your own. But anything that you can say to maybe help them consider doing their own 16-point legacy planning?
Yeah, absolutely. I will. I'll share a couple of things. Is that one? Yeah, there are a lot of cultural dynamics with this, and people don't want to talk about it. But I a lot of times lighten the load, or add humor to when I'm having this conversation with folks, and I'll say to them, I'll say, hey, you know what? Uh, Death's batting 1,000. Unless you're Enoch going out by chariot, everybody's got an end date, right? There's an expiration date. And so meaning you have an expiration date. And so what that means is that if you've worked your entire life, no matter where you are, what stage of life, it should be up to you to determine how you want all that you've worked so hard for to go to the next generation. And so what I tell folks is that here's the thing is that if you should have a plan in place. And if you'd say, hey, you know what, I don't want those, those kids, they're not going to get anything, or I don't, any of those type of dynamics, I would say, then write out a legacy plan, write out what your wishes are, write out what you want to have happen specifically, and tie that to, if somebody's going to receive something from you, what they are going to receive. And so I'm telling people, this is how your name and your good name lives on beyond you. There's a day that you're not going to be here. And so by you making these decisions, you're going to allow your children, grandchildren, and coming generations, 2 or 3 generations down, to know your name because you put this plan in place. Wouldn't it be nice to have your great grandchildren know your name because you thought about it 50, 60, 100 years before, and you documented it, and you said, hey, here's what I want to have happen to the third and fourth generation. That's what you're doing when you get a will and estate plan in place. So I'm encouraging people on that note. And I tell folks all the time, I say, hey, you're born looking like your parents, you die looking like your decisions. And
Oh,
so this is
woo!
one of those decisions that you need to make for your legacy.
You taking us to church a little bit. You said Enoch, and then you start talking about the children's children, and I thought about the proverb where it says a wise man leaves to his children's children.
Yep, that's right. That's right.
Wow. Or you can leave it to your charity, because some people I see, they leave stuff to their dog, and because maybe their children were acting up, and you see these stories that pop up. So the bottom line is, it's your choice, and you've worked hard for whatever it is, or you pay that insurance policy, you should be able to say where it goes. So I think we learned a lot today.
That's right. I've enjoyed the conversation. And one final thing I'll just say with what you just said is that, a lot of folks they have or you talk about charity, people have organizations and things that are important to them. Imagine if inside of your estate plan you said, "Hey, you know what? I'm a big supporter of the YMCA or United Way." And you leave something that you have a room or a building named after you because you put that in your estate plan, in your legacy. Your name, your good name lives on because with foresight you documented what your wishes were for all the things you worked so hard for your entire life.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your expertise today. I'm going to have links to your company in the show notes, to the other organization you mentioned, just so people can go look at things for themselves. But I just thank you for teaching us, educating us, and empowering us on getting these things done. And even some of us need to, recovering from empty nesting in medical school, build up the wealth and accumulate for the future. So thank you for your expertise today.
You're welcome, Dr. G. It's been great being with you.
All right. Well, we're signing out on this episode, everyone. Peace.